Yay! Hello out there, everyone. This is Sonia here, and tonight we are talking about Magic the Gathering. And tonight I have with me Tony and Sanjay and Robert.
Oh, hi.
So I guess we can start it off. I kind of wanted to ask, how did everybody get into Magic? And you can go all the way back to when you were like a little kid if you want to.
Also, Sonia, if you have the link to the live stream, can you share it?
Huh?
If you have the link to the live stream, will you share it so we can tweet it?
Yep. I believe that's it.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, Sonia, go ahead.
All right, so for me, I started playing only about a year ago, despite the fact that I had a bunch of friends playing it through like elementary, middle school, and whatnot. I never got into it. I actually never got into any of these collectible card games. Robert had showed me a few in the years back, but Magic I picked up because I have various wrist ailments. So I would play ping pong with my coworkers at lunch. My doctor said stop doing that. So I saw a couple of my coworkers started playing Magic, and I thought, oh, okay, that's something I can do, at lunchtime when I'm bored, without having to use my wrists much. So yeah, and then a bunch of my coworkers came out of the woodwork, and now we have a lot of people playing Magic at work to the point where we have, maybe 12-person plus tournaments going. But yeah, so that is my experience. So yeah, about a year's worth of Magic, I'd say.
That's awesome. And I'll ask Tony because he's the
He's the creepy one behind you.
the expert. Oh, no.
Yeah. So I learned Magic a super long time ago, back in Ice Age, which probably means not the Ice Age,
the Ice
real
Age.
world, the Ice Age.
Ago.
And so probably 15 plus years ago, like back when I was a kid, like preteen. So I learned it way back when, and just had an older guy like teach my brother and I. It just really was cool, like just really helped us learn while we're kids, so we're too young to pick up a lot of subtleties, so he was really, patient with us, and just learned how to play, and then kind of didn't pick it up until I was more of a teenager again, and then just started playing online tournaments and stuff, and I've been playing a lot since then.
So Tony, you say you mostly play on paper or online?
I play online a lot more than paper. So that's most of my background.
Okay.
And Robert.
I long time ago. Well, I got to turn off my fan. Long time ago. I came home from school, and I was probably in my early teens, so maybe 12, 13, and I came home, and my dad said, "Hey, I bought a pack of Magic cards for you. They're sitting on the speaker in the front room." Now, my dad, used to collect a lot of baseball and basketball cards and things like that. And so I'm sure this is where he actually picked it up, is at the card shop. But when he said that, I thought, oh wow, like a deck of cards used for performing magic tricks, because I was always kind of into performing magic.
Oh, so he didn't. Okay.
And I ran over and I grabbed this, brown box that said Magic on it, and that was intriguing. I opened it up, and I saw that it was these strange cards that did not look like traditional playing cards, and I didn't know anyone who actually played the game. I didn't even really know it was a game, so I just looked at the cards and tried to figure out what the heck it was, and I actually really didn't play it much until a couple years later, when I actually found people who played it. So I just kind of had them. And I collected them. I bought them from the store, and I kind of collected the cards. And later on, I ended up going to 2 different tournaments, each of which had their own very interesting stories. But I'll get to that later. So I started around that time, but haven't been playing since then.
Until now.
Yeah, until now.
Okay, I have a question before I answer mine. When did Magic start? Like, when was it developed?
It recently passed its 20th anniversary.
Okay, well,
So yeah, it has been around a long time.
20 years ago.
Yes, but actually, so yeah, I believe it was in the early 90s. So it's more than 20 years ago. It just recently passed 20th anniversary, and I believe the stats say it is now more popular than it has ever been.
Mm-hmm.
It is now more popular than it was at its inception. It is at its the height of popularity currently.
Yeah, I believe, I'm pretty sure, 20 years ago, when Magic was like first on the scene, I think my brother got some decks, and I'm like, what is this game? And I played a little bit with him, and that was back, it could have been the very first decks, like Mountain Gorillas and all that stuff. So
Yeah, the mountain gorillas.
yeah, it's like super old, and I didn't catch on to it too at that point because I really didn't have like the greatest experience with it. I didn't really get to like play with other people, and you know, I was really young, so it wasn't really that interesting to me. So that was my first introduction to it. So I saw like it, you know, a million years ago, and then recently, like a month ago, we picked it up and started playing it. So I really enjoy it now, but then I wasn't so into it, so I didn't really have this like long history of it. But I was exposed at the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's my kind of story for it.
Yeah, so I got the facts here. It is first published in 1993. It was the first trading card game produced, and it reached approximately 12 million players as of 2011. So
yeah,
lots of people playing it.
1993 sounds about right.
Yeah.
Actually, that's really funny. So okay, I guess now. Not sure what where I should start. There's so many things, but
yeah. I almost wonder, do we need to give an introduction to what Magic the Gathering is? I think it's pretty well known at this point. But
I don't think so.
But yeah.
I really don't think so.
No.
But I mean, I guess a question that I would have, it might be better to ask it later. But well, no, I'll phrase it as how do you think it's held up over the years compared to other games out there, other collectible?
So the other games in the same vein I think the other ones that got popularity were Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. Personally, I'll say that Yu-Gi-Oh! Was popular when I was in middle school. Oh, sorry, Pokemon was popular in middle school. Yu-Gi-Oh! When I go, supposing I go like to Frankenstein's or something to go check out their stuff. So they sell a lot of different things, but they also sell Magic cards, and I see very few Pokemon cards still around. I still see them selling Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. And when you look around for, say, accessories like playmats and whatnot, I see them advertising Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! So I think Pokemon, despite being a very popular franchise, I think at least in the United States, that at least judging by what's being sold, the player base of Pokemon is down for the card game, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Seems to be still around. I still see it, like, even my local game store still has a day a week where Yu-Gi-Oh! Is played, but Magic is by far the most popular paper card game. There's another game that is getting popularity that is only online, and that is Blizzard's Hearthstone. Which is based in their Warcraft universe.
Guilty.
Yeah. There's also Wizards of the Coast, the same company that produces Magic the Gathering, has a new collectible card game based in the My Little Pony universe. That is apparently.
I didn't know that.
It's actually apparently not super simple. Whereas some people say that Hearthstone is somewhat simplified compared to Magic the Gathering, which is just built up in complexity because they keep introducing more cards and they don't get rid of any. There's some, but My Little Pony supposedly is of the same level of complexity as Magic the Gathering.
Wow.
Yeah. I've not seen. I'm not actually certain if it's been released yet or if it's been played yet, but this is what I've heard from people familiar with it.
I wonder if there are bronies in the Magic community that'll just eat that up.
Probably.
Oh, yeah.
Possibly. Yeah.
I want to play it for sure.
Yeah, and then of course, so Magic has an online variant, so I believe the player base usually counts that as well. Magic the Gathering Online. It is an online variant that still you still have to purchase cards, and so there is you are purchasing virtual cards as opposed to buying paper cards. So it's not free to play, unlike Hearthstone, which is currently free to play.
Right.
So part of its player base is split there. Some would say the popularity of Magic recently is boosted back up due to them releasing a game called Duel the Planeswalkers that is available on pretty much every gaming platform, including iOS and Android. That is a single-player game with some multiplayer capability. It is not the full game. You cannot customize your entire decks, but it exposes you to the gameplay and the cards and is a tutorial. So a lot of people may have gotten into Magic from that more recently as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think the more recent versions of those games have been tending more and more to allowing people to customize it. So they're adding more options to the tools of the Planeswalkers. So now it's more like just regular Magic.
Yeah, but it is still a limited set of cards. It is not all the cards going backwards, and it is not tied to any specific format. They just have specific cards that they release for each version of the game. And they released, I believe the first version was in 2013, and they've been releasing new versions every year since. I can confirm the 2013 number. But yeah, they release a version every year. It is numbered for the year to match the core set they release every year, and they release it. They number it with the year later. So the current version being released that's about to be released, I believe, is Magic 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you think that with these games of free-to-play, even though they're online collectible card games, do you think that they're going to take away a significant portion of the audience from the classic, card games that you actually have to pay?
Yeah, it is certainly cheaper and more accessible. It's really hard to say. I've heard, anecdotally, from what I've heard, my friends who've tried Hearthstone and also play Magic pretty much say that Hearthstone was fun for a little bit. They quickly got bored, and Hearthstone just made them want to play Magic.
Yeah.
Meaning, I think they missed the complexity.
Right, but that's also coming from people who have already been playing Magic.
Right, exactly.
Or people who are already very passionate about it. And I know that I have always been a big fan of the collectible card games, but one of the biggest limiting factors for me was the cost, and also just the availability of people to play with. So even when I did have cards to play with, there wasn't always enough people to play with or against. And at the time, I also couldn't afford to keep up with all the new cards that were coming out, and I was not always satisfied with the cards I had, which is exactly what they want you to feel, but I couldn't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
But with games like Hearthstone, even though I could afford Magic cards now, I have more people I can play with on Hearthstone than I can with Magic. And so that kind of fits my lifestyle a little better, even though Magic has more depth. But there's also some other models out there that are kind of, helping achieve that. As I think I touched on before, Netrunner and some other like living card games, kind of have a little bit of both worlds. But to answer the question, I don't think the free-to-play or online games are going to take a large portion of the consumer base from the actual physical trading cards, especially because a lot of those people who are already dedicated to it and they've got their collections and they want to collect more. If anything, I think it's just going to kind of expand and maybe even create a little more competition that Magic maybe never had. And so we'll probably see more. And maybe there'll be people who play games like Hearthstone and think, wow, this is really cool, I want more, and then they'll discover games like Magic and stuff like that. So I don't see it harming anyone. I think it just adds to that industry.
Yeah, it's also possible that a game like Hearthstone may also choose to evolve and bring itself closer to how Magic is, and eventually have a revenue model, and maybe not be completely free to play in the future. So it's always possible that that Blizzard is just testing the waters and seeing how far they get before they can turn into something that's more that they can monetize a little more directly.
Yeah.
Robert, do you want to go into the differences between a living card game like Netrunner or Ascension compared to Magic?
Yeah, might as well touch on that.
Kind of going in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So trading card games like Magic or Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and others, they basically produce new cards every year, or in every kind of sectional, throughout the year. They have different models, but for the most part, every year they're producing new cards that add to a total collection. And the way you obtain those cards is primarily through booster packs, which are a set of, depending on the game, I think it's 12 or 15 cards that are random, but you're guaranteed to get certain rarity of cards. I don't know exactly what that is, but I think you're guaranteed one rare, some uncommons, and lots of commons.
Yeah, so it's a Magic rarity. It's 15 cards, one of which will be a land, and then you get one rare, which has a percentage chance of being swapped for the fourth rarity or the highest rarity class of Mythic Rare, and then you get, I forget how many uncommons, and then how many uncommons and commons split as after that.
3 uncommons and 10 commons.
Yeah, it's about to actually change for Magic 15 for the new set that's about to come out. They're changing the numbers around. They're adding, I believe, they're adding one more uncommon to give more uncommons to allow more flexibility in the uncommon slot. But yeah, that is the rarity.
So as you build your collection, you're basically buying these booster packs, and you're trying to find the cards you don't have. Mm-hmm. The exciting part about that is that when you get that booster pack and you open it, it's like an Easter egg hunt. You don't know what you're going to get. It's extremely addicting, and it's a lot of fun. But it also means that you may not get the card or cards that you want for a long time, or maybe never unless you trade it or you buy so many packs that you eventually find it. But there's no guarantee, and you'll end up actually having a lot of extra cards that you don't technically need. Living card games, which is actually the format that Fantasy Flight goes with. I think AEG uses a different name, but they're all fundamentally the same thing. But the idea is that when the game is released for the first time, there is a starter box, and the starter box comes with basically every card that you would ever need in the game. And at that time, I think it's usually like 60 to 100 cards. And it allows you, or actually no, I'm sorry. In the starter, there was I think like 120 or something like that. And it has enough for you to build 2 separate decks, so you can play with a friend. And all the cards in there, there's multiple copies of them, so you can include them in both decks or in multiples in a single deck. But when new cards come out, you still kind of buy booster packs, but instead of them being random, when new cards come out, you basically buy an entire set of new cards. So you're guaranteed to get all the cards that are available in the set when you make that purchase to that expansion. And sometimes they have small ones. In Netrunner, they have small, I think they're called data packs, which are, I think, have 20-some cards in it. And then they have larger expansions that'll end up having, like I said, 60 to 100. And that format I've actually become very fond of, because while I enjoy the whole opening the booster pack and seeing what you get, I also don't really want to, right now at least, I don't really have the time and patience to be opening booster packs and filling my closets with extra cards. So that works really well for me.
Sure. So I'll actually make an interesting point here where Magic has become popular enough that and a lot of people will advise you to play this way for reality purposes. I have avoided the gambling aspect. I'm not a gambler, so I don't go for the boosters packs at all. Like I have friends who, when a new set comes out, they'll buy a booster box, which is usually around $100, and you're buying 36 packs worth or something, just to start their collection. Magic is popular enough now that you can order singles, meaning you have stores and the ability for people to sell their own cards, where especially stores that can get boosters at wholesale values will crack them themselves, or buy and sell cards to be able to sell individual or what's known as singles online. So for me, when I'm building a deck or updating a deck, I stick to ordering singles only, and which eliminates the randomness aspect of it. I will never buy a booster pack on its own unless it's for the purpose of playing a format like what are called limited formats, where you're supposed to play with like a certain number of booster packs worth of cards and no more cards. You're playing with those exact cards. So that's the only time I buy booster packs.
The single cards that you purchase, though, are not actually sold by Wizards of the Coast, right? It's
correct. It is
someone else,
yes.
Someone or the organization who found it in a booster.
So yeah, Magic has a thriving secondary market, which is actually what allows Magic to continue to operate. It's what funds all the tournaments. Is that you have these other stores, the biggest of which are Star City Games and then TCG Player, which is a big network of sellers that. These two tend to run their own tournaments in addition to the professional tournaments that Wizards of the Coast runs. And they can afford to do so and have price support for them because of the money they make off of the secondary market, off of selling singles and markup, or opening boosters at wholesale and being able to sell them. So without that secondary market, it wouldn't exist. Also, if Wizards were to sell these singles directly, there would be an issue involved with the fact that Wizards effectively, to a degree, has a currency, right? Meaning Wizards is effectively printing money because they're creating cards that have a certain value. So they stay hands off of that. The only way that they do that, that they introduce selling cards where you actually know what cards you're getting, are in these pre-made decks, which are either intro packs or event decks, where they're decks that you have a known list. And sometimes when a card is printed in one of these pre-made decks, it oftentimes brings the value of the card down because people now have a way to access it that's other than buying through the secondary market.
That was our smart person rant.
Yeah.
Metrics.
Yeah. The thing it comes up whenever you have people that will say, "Oh, why doesn't Wizards just sell cards?" Or "Why are cards so expensive?" And "Oh, I wish they would just print, insert name of expensive card here. Like I wish they would just print more of that."
I didn't know that was a secondary party thing, selling the singles. I thought that was them, but
no. And there's a lot of discussion, and people who know all the economics of how it works will always be scared. Oh, it's also when the counterfeiting comes in, because Magic cards, older Magic cards especially, have so much value that they've been, and for a long time, people make counterfeits. And people talk, like some people would say, "Oh, I don't care about counterfeits. They're fine. It means I can get my cards for cheaper." And and that's not actually, and that goes into the whole discussion of, well, if counterfeits become popular and no one cracks down on them, then what will happen is Magic will cease to exist because the secondary market will fall away. They will not be able to sell cards for that value, and there will not be that high a margin to be able to hold tournaments and so forth. So
yeah. It's an interesting thought. I would take a college class on that sort of thing,
Yeah.
Not just because it's Magic the Gathering, but there's a lot of interesting logistics to it. And regarding counterfeits, I've seen people playing games with decks that are almost entirely proxy cards.
Yeah.
Cards that are not. They don't actually own the card. They've just
Yeah.
literally printed out a copy of it
Mhm.
and slipped it into a sleeve,
Yeah.
and they're playing the game. And what's interesting about that is it's still functional.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, it almost doesn't feel real unless you have the card. But
Yeah.
for the people who don't care about that, it almost makes you wonder, like, how the game could still be alive if someone
Yeah.
could literally just print out a bunch of their cards and just play whatever deck
Yeah,
they want.
and not only that, there's also online. There's also, for example, there's a system called Cockatrice, which effectively allows people to play these games for free against each other online by importing in the Magic card database. Again, people just play this for free against each other, and yeah, there's a question of how can this work? How come Magic just doesn't fall apart? And the big answer is basically things like tournaments. Is oftentimes you can play with like a group of friends you know or play with strangers online, but oftentimes like the main way people play is that Wizards sponsors and game stores hold these tournaments. The most popular general tournament anyone can go to is Friday Night Magic. Is that Wizards has sanctioned events where game stores can get some sponsorship to be able to do Magic, and Friday night is the main day they want people to do it. So basically anyone can say, okay, let me go to my game store Friday night, and they're probably holding a Magic tournament, and I can go play. And they're usually very cheap to enter, and they have some amount of reward, usually in store credit or in number of booster packs. There's also, of course, professional tournaments where people can make big money off of it. They are starting to become a sport of their own. They get coverage. Very popular on Twitch. And yeah, big money can be made. A lot of professional Magic card players cross over from poker because there's a lot of bluffing involved and similar skills. So you see a lot of poker players that you see Magic players and poker players swap in what they're doing and entering these tournaments to win money.
Well, then I'll hand that off to you.
Okay.
You play
Yes.
poker and Magic,
Yeah.
so it kind of.
And Tony's also the only one of us that plays bigger tournaments other than meaning plays at least online tournaments versus I think I only hit the local game store, Friday Night Magic kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess with poker, like, I guess I played and learned poker a little bit after Magic, actually, because I learned Magic when I was really young. And, like, there's definitely a lot of difference between poker and Magic cards, but one of the things that kind of holds true with a lot of games is reading the player and not just playing your cards. You play a player. So when you play against your opponents, like, one of the similarities is that the cards you have are random, but trying to pick up tells, trying to figure out what your opponent has gives you a really big advantage, and you can take that with you in both scenarios. So it's like poker that I think is a lot more explored and more obvious for people. They understand that there's just 52 card deck of the same cards, same rules for the poker game that they're playing, but Magic, it's a little more subtle because there's so many different cards and different combinations. A lot of people think, just play your game as strong as you can, try to figure out the nuts and bolts and just play your deck well. But figuring out what your opponent has also gives you a huge advantage. It's like if you know cards well enough that you understand that my opponent might have a counter spell, like they're really acting like it, they're holding back their mana at return, then you can play around it, and it could be just as clear to you as if they were showing you their card, and that just makes it a huge deal when you play against people. So yeah. Or even online.
How does
Even
that
though
work?
well, for like that example with the counter spell, if somebody's just like every turn they're playing cards, but they're always holding back 2 or 3 mana, then you can realize that they're probably holding it for something, and then you just play around that. You just don't play your big spells. You kind of keep playing little spells until they have to deal with it and they spend all their mana, and then you just lay the big spell on them. So So yeah, it's strategy-wise trying to tell your opponents either through their expressions if it's face-to-face or just how they're playing. And it's something that applies to both of those games. So that's
Yeah,
cool.
I've heard that Magic is sometimes it's like infinite poker, because like while there are formats, meaning that I don't know if I want to go into this, but there's different formats of Magic where they has a different set of cards that are allowed to be played. Like there are formats that only allow the most recent cards to be played, and the formats that allow cards further back and so forth. So yes, there's a limit on what your opponent could be playing sometimes, but even then, that's still hundreds of cards, and yeah, you can make educated guesses on what cards you think your opponent might have, but you really don't know. Every opponent can try something different. Every opponent every person puts their own spin on what they've done with their deck. When a deck is 60 cards, right? There's some wiggle room where certain cards can be different.
Yeah. But actually, one of the funny things I do since I play Magic Online so much is, like, say I'm playing a limited format with just cards for the most recent set, like the most recent year. Like,
Yeah.
I will go to my collection editor on Magic Online, and I'll look up all the instance for, let's say they're playing red-green deck. I'll look up all the instance for red cards and green cards. And just like if they start doing something funky, I'll be like, wait, I'm just gonna check my collection and just see what they can have, and literally be like, okay, well, they can have this, 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 and this, and that's it. So I can try to play around that. So.
That is one of the big differences with Magic Online, is that you do have the electronic resources available to you, so the play is a little bit different. It's actually funny. They have a yearly championship, the Magic Online Championships, where despite the fact you're playing online, they fly these people in so that way they're in the same room, but they're still each playing on their own computer. And they don't. And the reason there's a separate tournament is because the game is different. The online game has some differences that you need to be aware of. For example, paper Magic, you're not allowed to have electronic devices because they don't want any chance that you could cheat by like talking to someone. Whereas Magic Online, it's assumed that you have everything. So it's like, okay, whatever, it's a different game, you're just allowed to look at whatever you want.
Yeah.
So, now I've talked about a lot of that, I kind of want to get into more of the aesthetic of the game. I guess it would be a good way to compare other games. How do you think the artwork compares to other collectible card games?
So Magic Art's
had a lot of time to refine and update that. There's some other games have some pretty nice art, but honestly, like games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Well, okay, let me just go over the other popular ones, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. They're very different in their art styles, but they have one thing in common, and that is they're extremely flashy, and they are very, very busy. And in Yu-Gi-Oh's case, the framing of the cards, I think, is really, really pretty crummy. If you could actually compare the modern Yu-Gi-Oh cards to the way Magic cards looked when they first came out, these giant blocky borders, giant symbols that just look kind of funny. And Pokemon is actually much better. They have much higher res stuff, and there's a lot more clean icons and text and stuff like that. But it's super busy. You've got all kinds of crazy symbols and text everywhere, and they have it's like they're trying to make every single card out to be something fantastic, which is, I guess, good in the sense that they're trying to make it look good, but if they all look like they're crazy pieces of art, then it's hard to tell which ones are actually better or not. Additionally, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, and a lot of Eastern collectible card games have gone kind of crazy with their application of foil. Oh,
earthquake!
Earthquake!
Oh my!
Hold on.
It's not
Wait
reaching.
for it.
It hasn't reached down here, so it's got to be closer to you guys.
Oh, are we done?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, boy.
That was pretty crazy. Earthquake live!
Yeah.
Hey.
We are in California, people, if you'd like to know.
So,
Yeah.
funny story about magic and an earthquake, if you don't mind the
Go
interlude,
ahead.
is I was at a game store playing Friday Night Magic, and like we had the game store had not all their chairs are very good, so I was stuck with this really wobbly chair, and I'm playing and I'm just like, man, this chair's really wobbly, and everyone's like, no, dude, we're having an earthquake right now. And it was like one of those really long, like it wasn't a
rolling.
very strong earthquake. It was a really long rolling earthquake. So I took a turn, and I'm kind of looking at it, I'm like, is that earthquake still going? I'm like, yeah, it's still going. But it's, being in Southern California, we just kind of ignored it and went on playing.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
right now, we're just like,
oh,
it's over. Let's just keep talking. I'm not even checking on the dogs. I'm a bad person.
They're fine.
They're
They're
fine.
fine. They're okay.
Anyways, but yeah, a lot of the Eastern card games have gone absolutely crazy with their application of foil, like holographic things on their cards.
Mhm.
So much so that again, it just makes them so busy and ridiculous looking. Everything's sparkling and shining, and it's over the top. Magic, on the other hand, in terms of their art, they keep updating the actual card borders. And they're doing another update for the 2015 set to the border, and it's really clean. It doesn't distract from the artwork, which is spectacular. The text is refined and easy to read. It's just very clean quality appearance. But some of their cards will have foil applied to it, but it's done in a subtle way that really enhances the image and not just doesn't just muddy it.
Mhm.
What I enjoy about Magic versus the other like Yu-Gi-Ohs and Pokemons is that I feel like those cards are really focused on just the creatures themselves and not so much the environment. And I feel like when I play a game, especially a game like that, I kind of want it to be adventurous.
Mhm.
And Magic feels adventurous because of a lot of like the lands and that artwork behind the creatures, and it's not so busy that it distracts, but it really adds a lot to the game, I feel like, aesthetically. Then the other games, it's like giant creature, like, super foily in your face.
Yeah.
It's really pretty, but there's not that much. It's
Yeah,
not
not
that
much substance.
Yeah. So there's an interesting thing about Magic art is also that like it's advanced a certain way, and they always list the artist, and there are certain artists that have gotten popular in their own right for their Magic art, where people will say, oh look, it's a Noah Bradley piece of artwork, like, oh, this card, like, oh, this card is awesome, or people will go get their cards signed by the artist if they're at a convention or something. So it's interesting also there where Magic art has its own life, where people do that. And there's also the concept of alters, where people will it is entirely legal in Magic to play with cards that have had the art change so long as certain parts of the card are still readable. So people will do alters where they might either draw extra on top of the card, or they will use like certain, I think, acids or something to actually wipe away the card ink. And this is especially doable with foils, where there's apparently a foil layer that's what's showing through, where you can carefully wipe away the image and draw your own thing in there.
Yeah, and there's some really impressive cards that are done like that.
So would you mind if I actually share my screen? I want to give a couple examples of certain things.
Sure.
So let's see if it'll let me do so. There we go. So I don't know if this is showing up properly live, but
I can see it.
All right, this is an example.
So I'll be here.
All right. So this is an example of one of the older cards. I just want to kind of give an idea of what older art looked like in Magic, and let me go ahead and.
Oh my goodness.
So this is what Magic's older art looked like. This is still a modern card frame, I think. I can't remember. It's black bordered at least.
Very thick.
Yeah, it's just the borders.
Yeah, but the like you can kind of see like the art's a little some of the old art used to be kind of silly. In fact, this art is silly in the sense that this guy has actually been given a nickname, and people call him Tim. So he's Tim the Prodigal Sorcerer.
I like
to the point where sometimes they'll refer to using this ability as timming you. Meaning, okay, I ping you for one, or I tim you for one. So he's Tim or Timmy, the Prodigal Sorcerer. To give you an idea of what the newer cards look like, this is Noah Bradley, who I mentioned. It was a very popular artist among Magic cards, but you can see like they're really trying to like push the art a lot more.
Mhm.
It's not the drawings aren't as simple or as silly. A lot of the old art wasn't really consistent with each other, and now they give everything like a consistent look. So the art has definitely changed over time.
And on that note, they really have the color identities have really grown to the point where you almost don't even have to see the card. You can just see the image and you'll know what it's from because of what's being depicted. And they've done a really good job of that.
Yeah, and then just a small note here. This is the new card frame. So like if you look here, this is the current card frame for Magic, and then the new frame is here where they've changed the font slightly. They've added this little border. They've changed around the bordering in the bottom. So they keep updating this, and the new thing they have is this hollow stamp sticker kind of thing that for on rarer cards where they will to avoid counterfeiting. So so Magic cards have been changing over time in terms of like they keep updating the card frame. So yeah, they changed the font. They have a hollow foil stamp. They have collector info, which tells you like which printing it was, and changing the border size. And they always give a credit to the artists on their cards. So every Magic card will indicate who did the art.
I imagine the art itself has probably kept it, alive. I
think you click it again.
I'll click it again? Oh, there we go. Okay. As far as the collectability goes, because it's just getting better. And I think that just having those cards versus like online, it's really nice.
Yeah, definitely. Like online, you can only zoom in so much, but when you have the card, it's like, oh, I didn't notice that. Like a lot of times on the Magic website, they'll have little articles there like, hey, you probably didn't notice this thing in the corner there. It's like a little bird where a giant is. And
they actually do a lot of work in terms of consistency in a same set, where you might see like a certain character, doing something, or a certain character in the background or whatnot. So they actually do a lot of work to show that, like, okay, when you have this card, you have this character doing it, and then you have this character in the background of this other card, so you can see, these cards are related. So they made a comment of trying to tell the story through the cards, because Magic does have a story with each set, and they do release novels as well, and ebooks and whatnot, and then articles that go through the story, but there's, to a degree, part of the story is told through the cards. Like, oh, this character did this, and this character died, and so forth. And it's, someone told the cards. The cards also have flavor text on them, and people have contests of their favorite flavor text, because, or there's jokes of things of flavor rulings, where something doesn't win, or something just, someone will concede, like in a casual game, saying, okay, you know what, I'll let you win just because the flavor is so good.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
Examples of flavor are they have a card called Eye Gouge, which only does 1 point of damage, like reduces your top power and toughness by 1. But it's also got this thing where if whatever you're using it on is a Cyclops, they just get killed.
That's fantastic.
So just the flavor there. And then there's some flavor text referring to like the the flavor text will be actually a quote of a character talking about killing a Cyclops. Or things like they had someone called 100-Handed One, who is this big guy with 100 hands, and normally you're only allowed to block one creature. And someone said the original design was that he was going to block any number of creatures, but for flavor they decided to say, you know what, he can block 99 additional creatures. And part of it is because the art shows that he has one of his hands being cut off, so it's 99 instead of 100.
Do they actually? Is it actually 100 hands on the art? Do they actually manage that?
They did not draw in 100 hands. A lot of the hands
Okay.
are off,
I was
off the
wondering.
side, but the art, like I said, there are flavor rulings like this. Or they do keep the flavor up in the cards. They try to make sure that's there. Similarly, the colors. Colors all each of the 5 colors of mana and card types have each color has certain kinds of things that the effects that it'll have, and they try to stick with that. They call it the color pie, and they say like, okay, for example, black will get more direct kill effects versus red might have more haste, like more creatures that are that have either haste that are playable immediately or like direct burn, fire spells, or blue is the color where counter spells are. So they do try to keep that flavor as well in terms of like color pie. Especially when they have a character, the character will be castable with certain colors, and that will also give flavor to the character.
Yeah.
Yeah, their creative team has just really risen to the task, like in the last few years, last 5-10 years. I think they've mentioned they've really focused a lot on creative.
Mm-hmm.
Just on the creative aspect of Magic, so much so that one of their most recent sets a few years ago, Inzigrad, I guess, was developed top down as a horror set. So they just came in without any mechanics and just like, this set this year is going to be based on horror, and we're going to try to figure out how to make a set based on that. So
Innistrad or?
Innistrad, yeah.
Yeah, Innistrad, okay. Yeah, so yeah, it's definitely a set that was heavy on vampires. Your main villain was a vampire and so forth.
Yeah, werewolves and monsters.
Zombies and whatnot, yeah. And I do love the current set. The current set's amazing. It is a Theros and is based on Greek mythology. So they don't directly use the Greek mythological characters, but some of the proxies for meaning some of the people they use that are very clearly representative of some combination of things that happen. Yeah, inspired by Greek mythology and very Greek mythological sounding names, So, yeah, very, very cool there.
I have a question about the different sets. I guess they come out every year.
No, more than every year. There's more than one set released a year.
They start a new kind of story, a new set every year, but within that year, three sets come out. So they kind of start a new story, and then they build on it for the next 2.
So that's what's called the block, meaning a block consists of 3 sets. So the Theros block, usually the first set in the block is named for the block. So the Theros block has Theros being the first set, Born of the Gods is the second set, and the third set is Journey to Nyx, where Nyx is their equivalent of like kind of Olympus, or where the realm where the gods are from for Theros. There's also a core set release each year, which is not tied to the story of a block. It is just every year they put out they might reprint kind of staples or simple cards that just happen, but they don't have that. They aren't glued to that single story kind of thing.
The other part of my question also is going to be, when you're building a deck, how far back can you go into sets?
So it depends on the format.
Should you?
Yeah, it depends on the format. So Standard is the most popular format, and Standard, I believe, is the most recent. I can double check. There's literally a site called whatisinstandard.com.
What is it, Standard?
Whatsinstandard.com.
Oh, what's Standard?
Yeah, that explains. So this here, Standard will, I forget the actual thing here. It basically says this way. Depending on the time of year, Standard can contain anywhere from 1 to 2 core sets and 4 to 6 block sets. Wizards releases a block and core sets alternatingly. Every time the first set in a block gets released, the oldest block in Standard and the oldest core set in Standard simultaneously drop out. So standard can only ever contain 2 blocks at once. So basically, yeah, so that's standard. It really literally means is that you're only allowed to play the most recent cards. So currently, that is the Return to Ravnica block, the 2014 core set, and the Theros block are the only valid cards for standard. Then there's Modern, which is basically, and again, each format has its own banned list and its own restricted list. So banned is you can't play it at all. Restricted is you can only play 1 copy of it instead of the normal maximum of 4. So Modern is basically every card starting at a certain set onward is what's in Modern.
Okay.
And then there's Legacy, which goes back even further, and Vintage, which is basically everything.
Everything.
Then you also have Commander, which is a whole nother format, which is how which has its own rules, not only for which cards you use, but the deck, like what's in the deck. And then there's other formats that aren't sanctioned, like Pauper, which restrict and Peasant, which restrict the rarity of cards you're allowed to play with. So you can play back cards of any time, but you're restricted on the rarity of the cards you can play.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the answer is it's complicated.
So potentially you could just grab the whole. Well, especially if you're casually playing. You could
casual is sometimes called kitchen table because many people are playing Magic, kind of around a kitchen table as opposed to at a game store or something.
Right.
So yeah, casual, it's pretty much up to your friends, whatever you and your friends decide that your rules should be. Yeah. So interesting point about standard is that some people argue that standard, keeps people buying more cards than they would normally otherwise.
Right.
So standard has the lowest initial cost investment of any of the sanctioned format, but arguably the highest over time cost if you want to keep playing it.
Yeah, you have to keep getting the new decks in order to.
Yeah, you keep getting the new cards because you cannot even keep the same cards just to be like, oh, okay, I don't care if my deck is optimal, I just care that I can keep playing it. No, there are cards that you will not be allowed to play, they'll be rotated out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So then, potentially, okay, so you have standard, so then all your old cards, and then you take those, probably like how we do it, and make those your kitchen table for fun.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people do it that way. And that's also kind of where Modern grew from, is that same kind of concept of people who've been collecting cards over time, and they wanted something to do with them. So yeah. Interesting point about collections. If they print a card new, all previous printings of that card are valid. So, for example, they've reprinted a card. If they reprinted Mutavault, right? If you had a previous printing of Mutavault, you're allowed to play it. It doesn't need to be the most recent printing. All that matters is that since it was reprinted, all copies of Mutavault become valid.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's sometimes fun. You play against other people, and you're like, "I'm going to use this card that's 10 years old against you."
So, yeah, some people stick to the older cards just because they want to show off they have this old card. Some people will bling out their decks where they use either foil versions of the card only, or there's sometimes promotional versions of the card that you can get. So some people will bling out their decks that way. And then there are some cards that actually the newer printings are more valuable. Simply price-wise, because people prefer them because the art looks better. So people will say, oh, I want this art because it looks a lot better than this older art looks like garbage to them.
Yeah. I think it'd be funny if, when you talk about the foil cards, if someone, I don't think it would work, if someone had a strategy where they literally had mostly foil to blind the other player.
Well, funny thing about that, there's actually a legality issue with foils in that foils slightly curl over time. Sometimes. So in some formats, depending how curled your foils are, a judge at a professional tournament might actually not let you play with it. For example, some people would say, oh, I'm going to use all normal cards except for my lands that produce mana. I'm going to use foils for all of those. Well, if your deck's built that way, it's often you might be able to tell just by kind of touching the top of your deck, oh, this next card's a land or it isn't, and alter your play.
Oh,
So there are
that,
cheating aspects potential with foils.
So take care of your cards.
Yeah.
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 Just don't cheat.
Yeah, I don't cheat.
And don't cheat. Don't cheat is kind of the easy way to say that. So
We only have like 4 minutes left. I wanted to talk about Commander really quick, so I feel like that's probably the most different.
Yeah.
Because it's multiplayer, it's a little different. So I'll just start. I've only done it a couple times, and well, no, I only did it once then, multiplayer, technically, because I did a Commander against Robert, and
yeah,
I think even though that game with 4 people would probably take forever, we didn't really finish it, I think it's more interesting than just 2 versus 2, because I feel like you're missing out on that multiplayer aspect.
Yeah, so to give a quick explanation, like there are multiplayer variants of Magic. Commander is a format that lends itself to be primarily played multiplayer. So Commander, also known as EDH, which stands for Elder Dragon Highlander, which is not the official name because the Highlander is copyrighted or trademarked. So Wizards chose Commander. Yes, but the idea is that you have one commander who's somewhere you can basically always cast. There's a bunch of different rules. And then it's also known as a singleton format because every other card you have, aside from land, you're only allowed to have 1 copy of it. So you have a high amount of variance. The decks are really just meant to be played. It is a more casual format, and it's really meant to be played multiplayer. So there's a whole lot of politics involved.
Yeah. Multiplayer equals politics.
And the format has become recently more accessible because Wizards decided to sell pre-made Commander decks. They released 5 of them and Wizards basically enforces that keeps printing them so they can be sold at a MSRP. Some people did raise the prices because of the value of certain cards in them, but Wizards basically said that they're going to keep printing more. So it's much more accessible to someone than, say, building your own deck from scratch.
Do you think they could have tournaments like that? Where
I don't know if Commander is a sanctioned tournament. There are tournament 2-headed giant games, which is a 2-on-2 format. I could look it up, but we have very little time left. I'm not certain if there is competitive Commander or tournament level Commander where it's a sanctioned tournament. I think it's primarily a casual format.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I just think there's too much potential for collusion because, like, 2-headed giant, it's obvious who the teams are. But when you have a multiplayer format, even just not Commander, like, I don't think they have a free-for-all multiplayer tournament format either because I think there's too much potential for people kind of, going outside of the politics and be like, hey, buddy, I'll give you this if you help me out, and then, collusion entering the factor.
I'll give you this awesome card if you help me win.
Right, yeah, exactly. So I think that might be...
they might even fail on purpose,
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Anyways, last thoughts about Magic before I cut us off.
Well, we didn't get to talk about limited format that much, where you just open up boosters and play with those. But that's just like my favorite way to play because it doesn't require a collection, even though it does cost money to get the cards. But it basically puts everybody on a level playing field where there's variance because of the different things you're opening. But it makes it so you don't feel like, oh, this guy just has a $200 deck and I'm not going to be able to beat him because he spent all his money and I don't have it. So that's one of the reasons. But I love playing those types of tournaments. Yeah.
I guess then I'll ask, what is your favorite type of Magic? I'll go because I am a noob. I'm just going to say, based off of what I've heard, I would enjoy nothing that's would be in a tournament. It would just be very casual, kitchen table. I'd even like to go back and grab old stuff, like really old stuff, just stick it in there just for fun, to see how it would play and if it could actually hold up against something better, even if it's like a couple cards, and see if that could do something interesting.
So I personally I like kitchen tables. I like playing casually. Of the sanctioned formats, I tend to prefer standard right now, just because it is popular. I can always go to the store and find people to play. Yeah, that's a monetary investment, but I'm at the time in my life where I can actually afford stuff. And despite the fact that like I'm constantly having to buy new cards, I like the fact that it's fresh. I like the fact that it's something that I can get into and read. Okay, what's the new set? I like getting excited about the new things that are coming out, and excited about like trying to figure out what to change in my deck to make it work for the new cards.
Yeah, I've been enjoying Commander, only because I don't get to play the game very much. It's kind of nice to play something that's wild and crazy like Commander. You kind of get to experience a lot all in one game. But I think if I played more often, I would not enjoy Commander as much because it can be very exhausting. Um, but I've been enjoying that. Oh, and also a friend of mine showed me a series of articles that have been written, I think, every week since 2002 by one of the designers for Magic the Gathering,
Mm-hmm.
and it's basically a development diary about how they do a lot of the stuff that they do, and they've got a lot of really interesting information in there. I'll provide the link to Sonia, well, and all you guys, but Sonia, maybe you can provide that in the video message, because there's just a lot of really interesting information there as to why they choose the things they do, the process they go through to decide, the new mechanics and the flavor text and all that, even just what color
Right.
some card ends up being.
Right.
It's a lot of
And that particular person, Mark Rosewater, you mentioned too, is actually very active on Twitter and Tumblr. So he was always interacting with the community and talking about design stuff.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll put that link up there so everybody can kind of read those articles. I'll read them too, of course. So I guess that's it. This was very exciting, especially because of the earthquake. That was unexpected. So thanks, Tony, Sanjay, Robert, for joining me and discussing Magic. I feel like I wish probably maybe have another one, because there's just too much to talk about.
There's a lot to Magic.
Yeah. maybe like more of, we could even do like a comparison of something like, we could do Netrunner and talk about Magic at the same time. I don't know if that'll work, but something like that would be fun to kind of go into something more specific, because it's so many years of stuff.
Yeah.
And we didn't really talk a lot about, like, in the articles about the development and everything else. So that would be interesting to talk about that too. So I hope that's it for tonight. Thank people out there for watching us. And we will be back. Let me look at the dates. July 27th, I guess.
So we're not going to do a June one?
Oh, right. Okay. June. Okay, maybe June 29th. I don't know. I'll see. Oops, I lost my thingy. June 29th. If it changes, I'll change it on the website on G+. Okay, so good night, everybody, and hope you watch us next time. Bye.